Hello everyone and welcome back to the Florida Relocation Guide YouTube channel. My name is Adam Hancock and today we are going to walk through the relationship between hurricane impacts and wealth distribution. This one's interesting to me. I think you could gain a lot of insights from this if you look at it the right way. I also have a bonus at the end where I want to walk through some solutions and some interesting ruminations I've been having based on this concept. So I hope you enjoy and let's hop in. Okay, so I was reading through some studies earlier this week that were basically going after hurricane impacts on demographics and wealth and that relationship. And by doing that, they were grabbing data from NOAA, which I think is Atmospheric and Oceanic Administration, if I'm not mistaken, geographic data. Tax assessments, they were even crawling places like Zillow and Realtor that have these aggregated systems of a ton of real estate data. And basically saying, you know, what's going on with market conditions and population changes, turnover, etc. And then they did like 20 years of data. So tons and ton of data. It would be very hard to piece this together on your own to get trends and then get trends in a relatively volatile term. I mean, we're in 2023. You go back 20 years, you got the 2004, the 2008, all that stuff, the stuff that just recently happened, to basically draw conclusions on this relationship. Okay, so this is where it starts to get really interesting. So based on the study, 3 to 4 years on average after a hurricane strikes an area, wipes through an area, the replacement of those households that got damaged, 25% plus of them are replaced by people with a higher net worth and a higher average income. Okay, so in addition to that, let's talk homeowners insurance. This might be more public knowledge, but post-hurricane, because of all the stuff that's been happening, homeowners insurance currently sits on average in the state of Florida 3 times higher than the national average. And then we have home prices. So the study says that 3 to 4 years after a hurricane hits, just like the wealth distribution adjustment, home prices typically sit 5% on average higher than they were before. Now, some markets do start to creep back down around pre-hurricane levels, but it is extreme rarity that they ever go back below it. So we set a new foundation. Okay, so we've laid out a few important thesis and preface items. But let's talk why. Why would this be happening? What correlations could we draw to say that this is really the driving factors? The first one being is that economists feel that on average, higher net worth individuals, higher income households do a better job at self-insuring. This is protecting the volatility of a market affecting their overall network and just self-insuring the home, having the level of insurance where with their net worth combined with the self-insurance, then they're able to rebuild properties post a hurricane without it completely destroying their financial situation. Okay, another one which I've talked about a lot in particular is, as scary as these hurricanes are, as doom and gloom as it feels, especially if you're not from the area, and don't get me wrong, they're definitely scary, but economists and researchers came into this study, and if there's any surprise, it sits here, really believing that demand would have been materially affected by the hurricanes, especially in a very short period of time afterwards. That is what was proved to not be true at all. And there's a lot of interesting reasons why, but in my personal opinion, that take anywhere in the United States, if we just say super macro, 30,000 foot view, anywhere in the United States that's attractive to people when it comes to coastal proximity or retirement, etc., parts of California, parts of the Atlantic coast, many parts of Florida, and you say, what one of those areas doesn't have volatility when it comes to some sort of atmospheric, environmental, or climate-related issue, right? The same reason a lot of those are unbelievable locations and oceanfront and all these things is the same things that probably bring on the potential for fragility when it comes to weather. So I think demand, as sexy as the locations are from a demand perspective, is also why they potentially have an issue. But people don't feel like their plan B is to go, in the middle of some inland part where they feel like they're safe, and that's if that area doesn't have tornadoes or something, as a solution. So they typically will still push into one of the areas. And another thing economists suggested, which is absolutely true in my opinion, is higher net worth folks, investor type of peoples or companies typically will seek out volatility to be opportunistic on things that could happen. A lot of wealth in general changes during volatile times. That's when the uncertainty, if you're in the right stance, potentially, the right stage can be a benefit to you. And these folks can absorb temporary smoke screens of some sort, right? Higher interest rates, higher insurance rate that they feel like they can circumvent eventually, or at least buffer, where they're going after lower principal, lower land cost, and net long-term gain from their ROI models. And they just have a better system or infrastructure to be able to do this. So to them, some of the volatile times are opportunistic times. Really bad for some people and a lot of wealth distribution change for other folks, which you're 100% seeing in kind of the correlations of this study. So another thing they thought might be really viable for people, or people are choosing, is to rent. And you hear that a lot. But I think it's the correlation with demand I thought was interesting. So they're not saying there's a hurricane, I'm going to leave, or I'm not going to go at all. They're saying demand's still high as anything, but maybe renting either to protect retirement equity and or to provide a buffer where they can maybe make a poised decision later and they're not quite ready, where they feel like if a hurricane came, this isn't their house, they can escape easier, they didn't sink some big amount of capital into it, it's just a temporary high monthly payment that can be undone. So people are actually going to the same areas at higher volumes, but they're choosing to maybe consider renting versus buying versus not coming at all. And one final one I've been ruminating on, I'll throw your way before we hop into some bonus material I have for you, is the impact on surrounding areas. So when things like this happen, the same kind of with trickling down, if you've followed all that demand conversation, is what happens to the areas that are just around the area. And Fort Myers, as it's the most recent, is the best example. If you fall in love with what Sanibel is and Captiva, and North Fort Myers and North Naples, and you need a solution to that, and you're really in love with that area, it's Sarasota or maybe Boca Raton, but there's not plan C, D, E, F. So then those people, you'll see Venice, Florida start to get affected, Englewood, even the Port Charlottes of the world or something like that, or bigger suburbs. So then it creates this weird, unnatural economic demand where the rent and all that kind of stuff is people that weren't actually trying to go there but became an overflow solution. Hurricanes are, obviously unpredictable. So you have all this other natural demand of you have the COVID stuff and the work from home stuff and all this kind of stuff. And then a hurricane hits and creates like this big boost of people that weren't targeting that area in the first place. And I think that exacerbates the home prices, the demand in general, the rent in general. And it's people that have to make short-term quick decisions where typically they'll allow for some sort of economic uncertainty because timeline and logistics matter more than price. Okay, so now this is a perfect transition just to give you some viable solutions, right? Like I said it a million times, I don't like to just be like, oh, this is terrible with no solutions. But these will be more like interesting ideas based on this conversation. So I got to this point by my mind running on the idea of new construction. The newer the house, the higher the codes. Every year that's harder and harder. The windows, the insulation, single stories on block. Harder to be wiped out basically. Sitting on higher elevation planes because they build them fresh. They don't need them in low-lying areas necessarily. So you get rid of flood insurance, etc. So thinking of possible cool areas of new construction that I think would satiate some people's needs, and I want to alert you to them that have just been interesting to me in case you don't know. So we're going to start with coastal because hurricanes are coastal mostly. And if you want new construction in coastal, it's not that much of a commonality in the state of Florida because the land's already popular. There's not that much area. They can't just build million suburban communities around popular areas because the homes are already there. There's a couple in my mind I think are incredibly interesting at the moment. One of those is called Wellen Park. If you haven't heard of Wellen Park, it sits in South Venice, Florida in the Sarasota County area. / Northport, which is the eastern neighbor. And it's about 9 to 11 brand new construction neighborhoods. It's master plan. They're doing a really awesome downtown area called Downtown Wellen. That's walkable. You can walk to the Brave Spring Training Facility, Cool Today Park, where they do like 300 live events a year. Incredibly affordable in perspective to this area of how it's oriented. Very golf cart friendly. And just a kind of interesting offering. And that is not only adds urban walkability to a downtown, which is incredibly rare in Florida, but it also gives you a lot of beach proximity because Venice Beach is very close. And if you look at it on a map, as you go down, you get closer to the coast. And in this area, it's way closer. So you have Venice Beach, Casperson Beach, which is the shark's tooth capital of the world, and Brohard Beach, which is a dog beach. And all of that, all those communities are very close to that area. That's one. Another solution, if you go on the Atlantic coast, is in the Ponte Vedra area in St. Johns County. It's called Nocatee. Nocatee is a master plan area where you're going to get a lot of affordability because you get towards Jacksonville. #1 public school district in the entire state of Florida. Sarasota is #2. And very close to St. Augustine area. And it's master plan. A lot of like that part, the northeast part of the state of Florida offers a lot of like kind of It's coastal, but it's also historic. They use the nature well. There's parks, lakes and rivers and all this kind of stuff. But it's just a cool different area, and it's a lot more affordable in that part of the state than Southwest Florida. So I would look at Wellen Park and Nocatee as new construction alternatives for coastal proximity. So let's say you want to say, actually, the hurricanes are scary. I want to be in these towns, but I want to kind of go where it's safer. And sorry for the stream of consciousness here, but this is a Adam brain download, but that's what a bonus section's for. So let me riff some options that I think are interesting as an alternative for that. The first one you gotta mention, if you haven't heard about it, it's called Babcock Ranch. Babcock Ranch is a master plan area that is in Punta Gorda, which is east. It's 15 minutes north of downtown Fort Myers. So it's inland, but it's kind of in line with like Fort Myers Beach, but inland. So their premise when they built it was kind of built to solve this problem. So it's the first 100% solar powered community, I think, in the United States, master planned. They didn't lose any water and no electricity when the hurricane hit at all. And then it started getting in vogue when that happened. I think like Joe Rogan talked about it, CNN talked about it. Basically what they guessed, they were right. And they actually housed people from surrounding areas and that kind of thing. It's master plan. Multiple communities, like a smaller Lakewood ranch kind of. There's a Lennar golf course in there called Babcock National. Toll Brothers is in there. Mix Builder, 2 or 3 downtowns. It's quite lovely, actually. I think that's one to definitely check out. Below that, you have Alva, which is there's a couple solutions to be east of North Naples, Mercado, south of Fort Myers, but east to solve that problem. And Alva and Babcock Ranch I would look at. A lot of new construction going on. Also, you got to talk about Lakewood Ranch. So Lakewood Ranch that's where I live. It's a suburb really of Sarasota in Manatee County mostly, but it's 45 minutes northeast one way of where I sit right here in my office in downtown Sarasota. So you're about, closest you can get to the coast is 28 minutes, but it's far enough. But it's the #1 multi-generational master plan community in the entire United States. 30 plus communities, 20 plus you can still build in. There's 2 or 3 major town centers that you can go to. It's got something for everyone. There's 600 live events a year. There is 60 different clubs you can join, 50 different charities. It's the best mousetrap when it comes to master plan. It's smarter, it's bigger, it feels like Pleasantville, and all of that sits very close to the cultural coast of Florida, which is Sarasota. So it's a unique place. Another one I like is going north of Tampa. You have an area called Wesley Chapel, and that kind of shares like Wesley Chapel, Tampa Palms, Zephyr Hills, Land Lakes, and Lutz, or all this area, but it's basically going north of downtown Tampa. What that gives you is a solution to a bigger city, where Sarasota might be too docile if you're used to a city, like especially if you were targeting a Miami or Jacksonville or something like that. Tampa would be the solution for that. Good beaches in St. Pete and Pinellas County, but Wesley Chapel is like a cheaper Lakewood Ranch. It's the same premise. You went east, you went north, you got on the outskirts, you had land, you could build on land, but that one gets you far enough away from downtown Tampa where you can get suburban housing, you can get kid-friendly stuff, good schools. They're building lagoon communities out there and that. So just on a top of my head, as a bonus, I think these would be some research tools. Obviously, you can ask me any questions you have, but these would be some research tools that could satiate maybe the coastal thing, the new thing, and the inland thing. All right, my friends, that does it for this video on the Florida Relocation Guide YouTube channel. Again, my name is Adam Hancock. If you're not familiar with me, appreciate you watching. I'll throw some other videos up here that might be interesting if you enjoyed this one in particular. Please subscribe and like if you haven't already done, if you did enjoy it. And lastly, any real estate help we can assist you with, my group in the entire state of Florida, really. We specialize really heavily in relocation, new construction, but we do the whole gamut very particularly. We would love to assist. So my contact information is kind of everywhere. So please contact us, text, call, email, whatever you want to do. And also my website, tons of free downloads. So if you want to go a step further but don't yet want to talk to someone and you want to download relocation guides, analytical tools I build, there'll be a lot more too. I'm cleaning that up a little bit. VIP list for updates. Get on my newsletter. I do a lot of stuff that does not exist on YouTube weekly. That's an extension of it. So almost like you can almost educate yourself fully just from kind of using this funnel that I build where it's different levels of content. But yeah, anyway you want to get engaged, we would love to assist. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.